So we'll move on to the classification of inventory. So inventory is classified as an asset. It's an asset, generally a short term. Definition, these are items that have to be held for resale or used in the production of goods that are to be sold to customers. The main point of keeping track of inventory is so that you could come up with an accurate cost of goods sold. Inventory is less of an issue than it's less of a percentage of total assets than it used to be in the past. There's less manufacturing in this economy now. And, in 1979, inventory was typically about 15% of total assets. Now it's down to 6.8%. Just-in-time inventory systems account for some of that, where items arrive just in time to be sold. That's not new, but I think it's being used a lot more. When I was in high school, a lot of my friends worked at the General Motors plant that used to be over in Framingham. And part of all of the high schools, we tore through there, and it was amazing because they had an assembly line. It's like where you start with a little bolt, and then you end up, you follow it along, and it comes out to be a car. And so we'd follow that whole assembly line along and see how it worked. But as far as just-in-time inventory goes, they would have trains that would be approaching that Framingham plant from Buffalo, Chicago, from New Jersey, and they would all be carrying the items they needed for that assembly line just in time to get on the assembly line. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Anyway, so just in time. Okay, so for the merchandising firm, let's see, I'll move this down a little bit. For the merchandising firm, you're going to be dealing pretty much with a finished goods inventory. The manufacturing firm, you have the various categories depending on how, what process all the goods are in. This is more sort of a managerial perspective, but some of the problems you will have to be aware of. The basic categories for a manufacturing firm. Okay, the cost flow for inventory, if you think about it, and this goes back to your basic inventory calculations in 102, you start with your beginning inventory, you buy some more, so you have your purchases, and that gives you your goods that you have available to sell. And then as those available for sale goods are sold, they become cost of goods sold. And so cost of goods not sold at the end, or your ending inventory. So basically your available for sale either ends up as cost of goods sold if they were sold, or ending inventory if they're still here. Okay. Perpetual and periodic systems to keep track of them. Perpetual, we update cost of goods sold and inventory with each transaction, each sale. Periodic, it's done at the end of the accounting period, and so you may want to take time to review the basic differences between the two. If you remember, the perpetual system, it gloms everything into that merchandise inventory account. So when you buy some goods, it's inventory. When you return, you reduce the inventory. When you have a purchase discount, that reduces your inventory. Freight in, added to inventory. You sell something, you do the accounts receivable, sales revenue, and then you update the inventory. The inventory went out, it went into cost of goods sold. A sales return, you do your customer part of it, the sales return and allowance, accounts receivable, and then you put it back in inventory and lower the cost of goods sold. So that's your perpetual system. And then you contrast that with the periodic, and here's where you use a whole bunch of different accounts. You have your inventory account, which is your permanent balance sheet account, but then you've got these sort of subsidiary accounts. You've got purchases when you buy something. When you return something to a supplier, it's a purchase return and allowance. When you take the discount, it's purchase discounts. Freight in, its own account, freight in. And then when you make a sale, you do not update cost of goods sold and inventory. And when there's a sales return, you don't update it, okay? So that's done at the end of the period. So following this down, at the end of the period, both systems, you have to do an actual inventory count with the perpetual system, you're just going to be making an adjustment. Say your inventory doesn't come out to what you have on the books. Well, maybe some got lost, stolen, or spoiled, and so you just make an adjusting entry to get it to where it should be. With the periodic system, you're doing the count, and you have to compute your cost of goods sold now. And remember this, you have your beginning plus purchases plus freight in. These are all the accounts we had up there, less your discounts, less your purchase returns. And that gives you the cost available, cost of goods available. Count the ending inventory, and that gives you your cost of goods sold. Okay, so you probably need to make sure that you've got those down. Inventory control, this is, again, something you probably don't get too much into, but it's the balance between your inventory carrying costs, which would be the financing, storage, handling, versus the costs of lost sales since you don't have an item in stock. These are the two costs that are balanced when the decision is made as to how much inventory to have on hand. And you get into very fancy calculations on that if you go on in accounting. But basically, keeping good, what their point is here is that you have to keep good track of your inventory amounts and costs so that you can make good decisions as to how much you need and what you need to have. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Oh, this is, I mentioned before that you'll have to be doing a couple of cases in here. One possible topic, do the what do the numbers mean box. And it says, in Walmart, you are witnessing one of history's greatest logistical and operational successes, effective and efficient supply chain management. They save 5 to 15% across the supply chain. They use their buying power. Take a look at what that means to those suppliers. That would just be a thought, if anybody's interested. Okay. So let's see, what else do we get to here? We get to the perpetual, all of this stuff. Okay, so what I'd like to do next is we'll go through an example of the journal entries for the perpetual and the periodic, just to review it. We did this in class, and they thought it was a good idea, so, we'll do it here too. Okay.